This is the third of 3 videos for our series on Global Anglicanism for the study day at St Benet's Church in Cambridge. The other 2 videos, Christians Connected and Engaging with Other Religions and Traditions, are also available on our YouTube channel. To find out more about our Learning and Formation programme or about life at St Benet's in general, please visit our website www.stbenetschurch.org.
In my third talk, I will be reflecting about global Anglicanism and solidarity. We are an Anglican Communion with more than 85 million members and in more than 165 countries. We are the third largest Christian denomination after the Roman Catholic Church and the Eastern Orthodox Church. We are spread in many countries, which is really huge. Yet it is not just the diversity and cultural differences among the members in the communion that shapes global Anglicanism. But there are also disparities and unequal structures that affect different communities differently within the Anglican Communion itself. We have countries and communities with a large amount of wealth, but also millions and millions of our own communion members who struggle against poverty, inequality, and for their everyday survival. As the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, says, an average Anglican in the world today is a poor and a young African woman. Within Anglicanism, one cannot think about global Anglicanism or global Anglican identity without addressing many of these socio-economic inequalities and many inhuman forces which weaken some communities within the Anglican Communion. Equally important is also the socio-economic injustices and inequalities that we see in the wider society in which we as Anglicans are living. We see huge poverty around us even as wealth is accumulated only by a few individuals and corporations. There are communities and people around us in the world that starve to death. This is further worsened by political instabilities, unequal structures, discrimination and marginalization based on race, gender, caste, economic status, ethnicity, and many others. Today, in our political and social context, we are seeing how inequality between communities can affect democracy and unity. Some of the events that currently happen in our politics and society reveal this to us. This is one area diverse communities and people in the Anglican Communion can work together in terms of our mission in society. We cannot be an Anglican Communion with all these disparities going on among us and around us. Global Anglicanism cannot be blind to many of these realities, it asserting that we are one communion. The vision for global Anglicanism cannot neglect people who are suffering in utter poverty. Building better societies is central to being globally Anglican. This involves raising voices and working for social and economic justice. There is indeed a responsibility for the global Anglican community towards the other in the context of gender, racial, ethnic, environmental, and other forms of injustices. As global Anglicans, becoming committed to fight inequality and injustice and building better societies also shapes our unity. Today, the issue of human sexuality has come to dominate the discussions in the Anglican Communion with the extent to challenge its unity. Yet, an imagination of mission in terms of commitment to build better societies in the context of poverty and socioeconomic injustice can actually help hugely in the cause of unity. Pointing out the importance of the Sustainable Development Goals in 2015, Archbishop Justin Welby said that, I quote, "Humanity is called to justice, compassion, and standing alongside the poor. If we root our response to the afflictions of extreme poverty and other major global issues in these values, we can ensure that the sustainable development goals provide a vision and a framework through which all of us can play a part in working towards a more just world in which all have the opportunity to flourish and where no one is left behind." The quote ends. What is more important is, rather than seeing this as an isolated task about something happening outside our church life, a commitment to making such a vision of solidarity towards those struggling as part of our global Anglican mission can help us to unite in a common task. In other words, solidarity to the poor and working for building better societies is not just one of the tasks of Anglicanism, but this has to be seen and practiced as a way to define what is global Anglicanism. Today, the pandemic is one opportunity that can bring us together to be globally Anglicans by working together and expressing our solidarity with the most affected ones. The pandemic has made things worse and has exposed many unequal structures in our society and politics. One of the important realities of the pandemic situation, as has been pointed out by many people, is that the pandemic has affected most of the world, or we can even say that the entire world, but not everyone equally. This we can see both in terms of how the pandemic has affected the rich and poor countries, as well as rich and poor communities and people in each country. The unequal nature of the impact of the pandemic is reflected primarily in terms of two things. First, the unequal health impacts and deaths due to the pandemic in poor communities. In the West, how people of color, ethnic minorities, and poor communities have been affected much more compared to others has been pointed out by many. Similarly, the immediate and long-term economic impact is much worse on the poor communities and countries. In India, at the early stages of the pandemic and lockdown, we were helplessly watching millions of migrant workers and daily wage laborers walking on foot with their families and children, walking thousands of miles from the cities they lived and worked to reach their native places. These millions of people have lost everything in a day and left stranded in alien places without any help. This was due to the utter lack of concern and responsibility from the government for the vulnerable. We could see this reality in many other countries all over the world. Another reality is that the pandemic has exposed the unequal structures long built and strengthened by a number of inhuman forces. These were always there, and many social justice movements and people have been fighting them and raising awareness. as an immigrant in this country, my first observation in the early stages of the lockdown was on how the economy and well-being of communities have been primarily constructed in terms of consumerism and spending. Close the shops and stop the businesses, everything comes to still. This is not a new thing, of course, but the pandemic helped me, and I hope many others, to understand this better. Now, in terms of the response to the pandemic, we are in the stage of getting and distributing COVID vaccines. With the vaccines arrived now and started to be given, our governments and international community need to see the whole world in the picture, and we as Anglicans connected globally can play an important role. Clearly, healing in one part of the world alone is not sufficient in the context of the pandemic and in an interconnected world, and there are calls for wider responsibility. And we as global Anglicans also need to join in calling for such responsibility, calling our governments and our communities for such a responsibility towards the other. Last week, a Guardian columnist in his piece titled "Coronavirus Vaccines Offer the World Hope Unless You Live in Africa" pointed out that while many wealthy countries in the West and developing countries like India have secured billions of doses of the COVID vaccines, and some countries even many times more than what they require, I quote, "All the people who have received a jab in Africa could fit comfortably on the top deck of a London bus. According to the World Health Organization, just 25 people in a continent of 1.3 billion have been vaccinated." Quote ends. In Acts chapter 1 verse 8, Jesus tells the disciples to be his witness in Jerusalem, in Judea and Samaria, and to the ends of the earth. Christian witness is witness, as someone has said. Witness as witness. It is to be with the people. It is being with others. Solidarity is an important feature of Christian mission in the context of a responsibility and loyalty to the other. To be in Christian mission is to be in solidarity with the other. For global Anglicanism, a reimagination of Christian mission committed to building better societies through solidarity and action is vital. Such mission is rooted strongly in the mission and vision of Christ about the kingdom of God. And such mission that brings together Anglicans globally can be an important step to strengthen our unity and our common Anglican identity amidst all our differences. My third and final talk ends here, and I look forward to our conversations on the study day. Thank you very much.